So hey everybody, in this video today we are going to take a look at the introduction to OBS, Open Broadcast Software. What is it? How can we use it for cool things like video streaming and video recording, and even a virtual camera to up our game with our Teams or our Zoom meetings? Let's jump on in. Now, you probably have seen a lot of people, certainly over the COVID period, doing some really cool and clever things with video recordings or even their internal team meetings where you can use an OBS virtual camera and overlay lots of different sources and backgrounds and frames around your video. I just wanted to put this little video together just to give you a little bit of an insight and an overview as to what OBS actually is and how you can get started with it to up your game in terms of your camera capabilities. So if we browse on over to obsproject.com, you'll be presented with this desktop, this web page, and what we can see is we can download this software for Windows, for Mac OS or Linux. So I've gone ahead and I've downloaded this for Windows. It gives you a quick screenshot as to what the OBS software actually looks like. Don't be deterred, it's relatively simple and straightforward once you've got it set up and running and work through a few different things that you can actually do with this software. So without further ado, I've gone ahead and downloaded that software and I've installed it. When we open up the software, we are presented by this screen, which might look a little bit daunting when you first look at it, but effectively what we're faced with is a preview window. So this is actually a window of stuff. It'll hold all your camera feeds, your background, your images, whatever it is that you want to layer up to use to record or to live stream or to even output as a virtual camera. So I'm going to talk you through a few things. So what you can see at the bottom of the screen, like I say, this is a brand new installation of OBS. I've opened it up. I've got a profile called Demo and just a scene collection called Demo. What you've got to think about is that you've got this concept at the bottom, a few windows, one called Scenes, which you're presented with a default scene called Scene. You can add many scenes in here, and what you can do, a little bit like a PowerPoint presentation, think of them as different slides. You can transition between the different scenes. Now within each scene you can have one or more sources. At the minute we don't have any sources created, so what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of an anatomy around about this this preview pane at the moment to see what we're looking at, and we'll go ahead and we'll do a few demonstrations. So we have a blank scene here at the moment. The first thing that I'm going to want to do before I do anything else is let's just try and add a camera to my scene. So if down the bottom here, if I browse the sources, I click on the little plus button at the bottom and I've got a whole list of things that I could add to this scene. So for now, we're just going to concentrate on actually using a camera. Now I've got a few cameras attached to my computer at the moment. So if I select video capture device, I can give that device a name. Now it's always a good idea to give it a meaningful name so you know what that is rather than leaving it at the default name of video capture device. For example, the camera I'm recording this on at the moment is my main DSLR, mirrorless camera that I use. I've got a little USB camera off to the side. I've got another camera off to this side, which is the Elgato face cam. So for example, if I wanted to use this camera off to the side of me, I know it's the face cam, so I'm going to call it face cam. I'm going to click OK. And then it's going to ask me to select the device. Now, like I say, I've got a few cameras hooked up to my computer and a few virtual cameras. You may have less or more on your system, but the important thing is to recognize which camera is called which in your system. So my face cam, surprisingly enough, is called the Elgato face cam. So if I click on Elgato face cam and I just keep the default, you can see now it's immediately picked up the source from that camera that's sat just off to the right hand side of me there. There's a few settings and features and bits and pieces that we can change. For now, I'm not going to worry about those. I'm just going to click OK. We've now introduced our first source into our scene that's called Scene. Now you'll see that that video camera source has got this little red box around it. Now we can use these handles to just resize the video. You can see that we've got this black background. I can move it around on the background. I can place that camera wherever I like, so I can go from full screen right the way down to just making it little and placing it somewhere on my scene. So that's great. So we've introduced the first camera. So if, for example, I just wanted to make that camera full screen, I'll just leave it at full screen. And maybe I want to transition to a different scene where that camera becomes a bit smaller. So what we could do is over here on the left hand side of our OBS software, let's click on a new scene. Maybe we want to call this one small camera. Again, use descriptive names for your scenes, and you'll get used to this as you build more and more complicated scene collections. You'll get used, and you can change the name afterwards if you need to, but try and keep to some kind of a coherent naming convention based on your needs. So there we go. So I've created a new scene, and whilst I'm there, I could right click on the original scene and rename it to large camera. So basically, I've now got two scenes. One scene with the face cam source, which is full screen. The other scene, which is empty. It's black. It's blank. It's got nothing in there. What I could do now is I could add completely different camera if I wanted to, or I could add that same camera by going back to the plus sign, video capture device, and you'll see now that my existing device is there from the previous scene. So I could say add existing, face cam, okay. So effectively what I've got now is two scenes that basically both have the same source, the same camera feed on them, and I can flick between them, but look, nothing's happening. Nothing is changing. It's the same camera source. So let's click on our small camera, highlight our face cam source, and let's make it small. So now I could drag that down to the corner of the screen. Now, if I transition between the two scenes, I can transition between large camera and small camera. So hopefully that'll give you an idea of the kinds of things that you could put on there. So let's go for something else now. Let's just say, okay, I'm not fussed on having that black background. Let's say, for example, I wanted to insert an image into my scene. I could go back onto the scene that I wanted. So in this case, the small camera scene. Let's add another source. And that source, we could add an image for argument's sake. And I'm gonna leave this as a name, something like background image. And let's click OK. Now what it's going to ask us to do is go and select a background image. So I'm going to use this. There's a preview. Its dimensions are 19 by 20 by 1080, 1920 by 1080. I'm going to use that as my background. It's a nice technical background. And there we go. I'm not going to worry about the other settings for the time being. I'm just going to click OK. So now you think, well, where's my camera gone? My background image is effectively in front of my camera source. So it's quite easy to change that. We could literally drag and pull that down so we can reorder our sources. I could resize much in the same way as I did before. I could resize that image. But hopefully you'll see that we can start to layer up the components that we've got in our scene. And we can sort the order of the sources so that they appear in the right order to what you want them within your scene. Now we've got the concept of one scene which is the large camera, the other scene which is the small camera. And so now all of a sudden I've got the ability to switch between two scenes, and I can output that either to my recording, to my stream, or to something called a virtual camera. So if I click on add and we start at the very top, we've got an audio input capture. You'll see at the moment that I've got no means of capturing my audio. So if we click on audio input capture, I'm speaking and recording this through my microphone, which is here right in front of me. I want to include that within my scene collection. So I'm going to click on audio input capture. Again, I'm going to give that a name, Elgato Wave 3 mic, which is the name of this microphone. And I'm going to get rid of that capital L there, and I'm going to click OK. Now it's going to ask me to pick which microphone I want to use. Now, for the purposes of ease, I've got this mic input, the Elgato Wave 3. This is just the dedicated input from this microphone. I'm going to select that. I'm going to click OK. So now all of a sudden what you'll see is I've got this audio mixer available to me now, and I can start to control the amount of gain, the amount of volume that this microphone is actually putting out to my recording or my stream. But equally, if I now browse back to my large camera, my audio goes. So now if I was recording, my audio would disappear. I would be speaking, but no audio. So we've got to add that input in to this scene as well. Again, add existing, Wave 3 mic, OK. So now all of a sudden I've got audio I've got video between two scenes, one large camera, one small camera, and we put a background in there. So if I wanted to include something like my web browser, if I wanted to display my web browser within my video source, like I've got my Edge browser, it's currently open, it's showing the OBS homepage at the moment. That could be showing any particular web page that you liked. Let's look at how we could maybe incorporate showing a window. So in this case, this browser or any other application on my computer. So I'm going to shift that out the way of this screen. I'm going to go back to my scene collection, my small camera scene, and look at the sources. I'm going to click on this plus. Now we've got lots of different options, but one of the ones that we could use, for example, would be window capture. So if we select window capture, and we'll give this a name of Edge browser, for argument's sake, and click OK. I'm presented with all the open applications that are running on my system at the moment. So you can see my MS Edge browser.exe is currently showing the OBS web page. That's the one I want, so I'm going to click on that. And again, I'm not going to worry about the additional configuration. I'm just going to click OK. Now I've actually got that web browser that I can now move around my scene. And you can see it overlaps my camera. So back to the ordering, I could just drop that down between my camera and my background image. Now they're kind of layered up in a way that I could make that bigger. I could show that in the center of my screen. And you can start to see that we can start to get a little bit creative with how our scene looks. So I could do my introductions from the large camera and speak to the camera up there. And I could then browse over to my small camera and show my scene. Now, that web browser is actually off to on another monitor, so I could absolutely control that web browser. I could scroll up and down. I could do whatever I need to do in terms of a presentation. Equally, that actual windowed application that I'm showing in the source could be a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so what about if I wanted to display my entire desktop? So I've got another desktop which is to the top of my screen, out of shot. I could actually click on the source and use, right now I just want to capture the entire display, not an individual application. So I've got the option to use a display capture. I could call this projector monitor. For me, I've got a projector that is a separate monitor above my screen. I could click OK. Now we're faced with selecting which monitor. So I know that I've got two landscape monitors and I've got two vertical monitors. So you can see by the orientation that this is my primary monitor, the one that I'm recording now. So display 3 would be my monitor that's actually got nothing on there at the moment. But you can see that I can actually capture the entire desktop. Again, we can order them and we can resize them. So now all of a sudden I've got a scene. Maybe I want to make that a little bit smaller. Let's put that in front of the Edge browser. There's lots of different options I've got. So for example, I could open maybe a Chrome browser. Again, this could be any application just for purposes of illustration, and I could put it up there onto that particular desktop up there. You can start to see how we can layer up these different sources, how we can layer up the different scene collections. We can resize the images. There's another way that we could add another source. So for example, let's just say that we wanted to use this particular desktop view, but actually we only want to see the browser. Within OBS, we got the ability to use these grab handles and actually start to crop the image. Now it's starting, my scene collection is starting to look a little bit messy. So for the purposes of what we can see and what we can't see on this particular scene collection, we've got these little eye icons which basically hide or show particular sources. So for example, say I just wanted to hide that Edge browser, that OBS browser behind there. Say I want to hide, I could click on that little eye icon there and it disappears from my scene. So now let's just say I wanted to view this Chrome browser, but I didn't want to view this extra desktop space. If I hold down my Alt key on the keyboard, I can now actually start to crop that image in from the side, from the top, from the other side, and of course from the bottom. Now it looks very similar, like I may have just captured that as a windowed application, and I can resize that. So you can see now I've got a display capture with a browser open on that display, but I've also got a window capture which happens to be a browser, and I could probably alternate now between the two. by turning them on and off. And like I say, this is the power of the actual OBS software itself, is that how you layer these objects up and what you do with them is completely up to you and what you actually need to show. But hopefully that gives a little bit of a sense as to the kind of things that you can actually layer up. Other object sources that we could use, which I'm not going to go into all of them in this video. We might take a look at some of them in other videos, but basically have a little play, have a play around with these things, see how they work for you and that kind of stuff. But for example, if I wanted to add another camera, I could just simply go to a video capture device, and I could call this is my sand stream. That's the name of a little USB camera that I got off to the side there. Again, I'm going to search for it in the list, and I believe it is this one here, full HD webcam, and it is. So you can see it's a little bit of a cheaper USB camera. It's not really positioned very well, but now I've got another camera feed that I could use on that scene. Now, I'm just showing this so you can see how you can put things into your scene, how you can move them around and stuff like that, just as an introduction to what you can do with OBS. So for now, I'm going to delete that because I don't really need it. I just wanted to show you could have multiple camera feeds in there. So I'm just going to remove it. Yes, I'm going to remove it. So that's gone from that particular scene. So hopefully that's giving you a bit of an idea that we can now browse between two scenes, large camera and small camera. So at the minute you can see that those scenes, much like using a presentation piece of software where you can fade between the two scenes. If we look slightly over to the right and you've got this concept of scene transitions, we can now select what kind of transition we want. Do we want a simple fade? Do we want a simple cut? Like if I select cut, it will just cut to each scene. So if we wanted to use something different other than, say, a cut scene, we could use something like a Luma wipe. So you'd probably be familiar with Luma wipes. So I'm just going to create a new scene transition, and I'm going to call it Demo Luma. That's my name of my transition. If I click OK, I've now got the ability to select lots of different patterns and things that we can use to transition between our scenes. So for argument's sake, if I wanted to use blinds horizontal, I can preview that. And you can see if I preview it, A and B are the two different scenes that it's going to transition between. And you can see it's going to do that kind of little blind thing on there. You can OK that. And now all of a sudden, if I flick between my scenes, I'm now doing this Luma wipe transition. And of course, you can add more different transitions and you can get a little bit more advanced and change those up between different scenes if you want to. But for now, say I didn't want to use that blind, I wanted to go back in and edit that particular Luma wipe. I could go to properties and change that to say, let's go for squares. What does that look like? I can preview it. Yeah, okay, I'm not happy with that one. What about if we look at checkerboard small? Okay, it's starting to get a little bit more clever. So now all of a sudden you can see that it's changing using that checkerboard. The other option we've got is to change this duration. So it takes 300 milliseconds to show that Luma wipe and transition. Say we wanted to make it a little bit slower, so we could put it up to 2 seconds just by changing that to 2000 milliseconds. Now all of a sudden, you can see it takes a little bit longer to transition between the scenes. So hopefully you get the idea there, and we've got a number of different transition types in there. We've got a slide, we've got stingers, which we might get into in different videos, fade to colors. But hopefully that has been a decent overview for how you can get started with building your scene collections. Now finally, how do we output this? Now we could record, so within OBS we got the ability to start streaming, start recording, start a virtual camera. They're fundamentally the three things that you're probably going to be using OBS for. So for the example of how might we output this to, using maybe a Zoom or a Teams meeting, as our camera feed? Well, it's a simple case of starting our virtual camera. And that's it. We've started our virtual camera now. So when you open an application that needs your camera, you will see a camera source called OBS Virtual Camera. Rather than using your default camera source, you would change it to OBS Virtual Camera, and you could then present that into your particular application. So I'm just going to browse and I'm going to create a new meeting in a Teams channel at the moment. So Now that I've got my virtual camera running, I could actually click here into the settings and choose which camera I actually want to use. So you can see that here I've got the option of all the cameras I've got set up. Like I say, I've got a number of cameras on my system, but I've got this option of OBS virtual camera. If we click on the preview button, you'll see that it's actually outputting the feed. And yes, it's reversed, it's mirrored, but that's just for how you see it. I'm not too sure why the Teams does that, but believe you me, when it goes out the other side, it won't be reversed. But now if we just leave that there for a second, and if I just make my OBS window a little bit smaller so you can see it. If I now transition, you'll see that that is the actual transition that's going off into my Teams feed. So now all of a sudden you've got the ability to have OBS running and hold your meetings and literally transition between lots of different cameras, you know, have some fun in meetings, record, stream, all of that good stuff. So, hopefully you've enjoyed that. It was a quick, brief introduction to OBS and how you can use it to up your game with your Teams meetings. Have some fun, enjoy, bring in all those sources, do what you can to make your streams and your videos more interactive and fun. But for now, hope you've enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for the next part. Thanks for watching.